Apple did good today. Bravo Tim, bravo. Although, if somebody had told me I'd be watching Craig Federighi shred to Black Sabbath's Paranoid, I'm not sure I'd have believed you. So, Apple blew everybody away at WWDC with their Black Mirror-esque Vision Pro augmented reality headset, which is just bonkers by the way. But I want to talk about the Mac, because Apple actually did announce quite a few updates to existing Macs, as well as a few new products. But I guess because of the Vision Pro launch, Apple only really spent I think about 15 minutes on Apple Mac hardware. So there's a lot to talk about. And I want to start with probably my favourite announcement from the whole event, the 15-inch MacBook Air. I actually kind of can't believe I'm saying this, but it's a really good deal. And I'll tell you why that is in just a second. And I'll talk you through the specs and the different models and how it compares to the 13-inch MacBook Air. But I do want to answer a more important question. Who is this thing for? Let's just say I think home studio producers and musicians are really going to like this thing. So I would probably order this new 15-inch MacBook Air immediately, if I had the budget for it. The new 15-inch MacBook Air starts at $12.99 US or £13.99 sterling, which isn't as good of a deal here in the UK. Now, one thing to note is that Apple has actually lowered the price of the base model 13-inch MacBook Air, which now starts at $10.99 US instead of $11.99, which makes both of these laptops really well priced for the performance that you're getting, especially if you live in the US. And the 15-inch is actually only $100 more than the 13-inch was 2 days ago. This new form factor comes with the M2 chip, but what's interesting is that the base model 13-inch M2 gets you the binned GPU chip, which only has 8 cores. But with the base model 15-inch, you're actually getting slightly better performance with that full 10-core GPU. The new 15-inch has the exact same I/O as the 13-inch MacBook Air. You get 2 Thunderbolt/USB-C 4 ports, the MagSafe charging port, and of course the headphone jack. The battery life is also comparable to the 13-inch at 18 hours. And Apple is claiming that it's the world's thinnest 15-inch laptop at just 11.5mm thin. That is a thin boy. And it weighs just over £3. I think this will be a dream for anybody that travels regularly. Storage wise, I won't go too much into the details on this, but just bear in mind that if you do order the base model, you will have to put up with Apple's slower SSD configuration. But if you upgrade to the 512GB option, you'll have double the speed. Just something to bear in mind if you do plan on ordering one this week. So to answer that original question, who is this new MacBook Air for? Well, I think this new MacBook form factor will be the perfect trade-off between performance, weight, efficiency and screen size. For most people anyway. I think that given you're getting a 15.3-inch screen in a machine that has a much smaller footprint than the older Intel 15-inch MacBook Pros, it's going to be a super desirable machine. Lightweight and just perfect for somebody who needs a really capable machine while they're on the move. And I think this is especially true for those needing good CPU performance but are less concerned about the GPU. A light bulb kind of went off in my head when Apple announced this though, because I do think this is going to be really good for home studio producers and musicians. For music production software like Logic Pro, the experience is just so much better on a larger screen size. On a 13-inch, everything is just very crammed and bunched up, so I do think it will be fairly game-changing for applications that have multiple windows like an inspector and then a region for tracks like Logic. And performance-wise, I think we've seen all the M2 Mac Mini reviews out there so far, and the consensus seems to be that the M2 chip is just plenty powerful for most music production needs. And of course the GPU is less important here for making music. And I do think this makes it the perfect combination for hobbyists or home studio musicians that need a secondary machine to travel with, and the sweet spot for anybody looking for this sort of versatility. However, when you do begin speccing up the 15-inch MacBook Air on Apple's website, you do start to enter 14-inch MacBook Pro territory in terms of price. So it will be very interesting to compare the two models and to know which one is the right one to go for dependent on your needs. Stay tuned for a video on that comparison coming in the next few weeks. Apple did also announce a brand new Mac Pro at WWDC, the not so modular Mac Pro that it turns out nobody really needs. But I think that's the reason why nobody really needs to upgrade to a Mac Pro. The updates to the Mac Studio were just phenomenal, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think as a result, the number of people actually wanting to splash the cash on a Mac Studio are so minimal. But at $69.99 US, Really, Apple? I'm not really going to say much more about this because if you're a home studio musician, professional or hobbyist, you probably don't need this. And if you're anything like me, then there's no way you could afford one of these anyway. And for those of you that can afford to buy one of these, why are you watching my channel? You guys should be on a beach somewhere sipping champagne and not watching me. Anyways, PCI expansion, okay, that's good. But it's a very strange product in its entirety for me. And first impressions, it looks as though the existing Intel cheese grater shell has just been repurposed for Apple Silicon. And Apple haven't actually spent the time to redesign the Mac Pro from the ground up for Apple Silicon. But yeah, those are my first impressions. I'll cover more of this when we start to learn more about the product. And finally, Apple has made some pretty significant updates to the Mac Studio, which makes it an even more desirable machine, in my opinion, than it previously was. And we now have a desktop line for everybody, starting with the M2 Mac Mini. For a little more, you can upgrade that machine to the M2 Pro chip, and then we have the Mac Studio range that starts at the same price of $19.99 US, but now with the M2 Max chip. And for the higher tier model, Apple has announced a brand new chip, the M2 Ultra, which is basically two M2 Max chips fused together, and that comes in at $39.99 US. So you can see where I'm coming from, hopefully. Nobody needs a Mac Pro when you have this kind of power, and as a result, part of me thinks that Apple just didn't spend too much time on the new Mac Pro. I think maybe they've realized that in this new world of Apple Silicon, that product just doesn't really make a huge amount of sense anymore. So there you have it, guys, a really interesting WWDC and a really strong one for the Mac. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe if you're new and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of my future videos on these new Macs. If you do happen to be in the market for a new MacBook Pro now though, then keep watching for a link to another video that might help you with that purchasing decision. See you in the next one.